When I was growing up, I loved to read. I'm dyslexic and reading didn't come naturally to me. It was very late on that I learned to read independently by myself. And when I started to read everything I could lay my hands on. I particularly like thrillers, mysteries, whodunits. I love the narrative, the formula, the plot twist, the character development, and particularly the key person of interest. Now, in my research, I spend a lot of time working with tech organizations. I'm interested in how they implement EDI or DEI policies, so equality, diversity, and inclusion, and in particular, who the advocates are for diversity within those organizations. And it's striking the parallel with the whodunit, because what makes a whodunit so compelling is not the what and the why, but the who and the how. So when I engage with tech organizations, one of the first points of interaction or points of interest that I have with that tech organization is finding out the who does the EDI, who does the diversity policies within that organization. More often than not the COO, not the CEO, through other employees, other groups within that framework. So this might not work this morning, and if it doesn't, you're gonna have to forgive me in advance, but I'm gonna go all in on the whodunit, basically, all right? That's how we're gonna treat this. So you're gonna welcome yourself to the numbers game, and I'm gonna use this to facilitate a lens on how we look at EDI, all right? So imagine you work for a tech organization and you're sitting in a plush hotel conference room, much like this one. You're expecting nothing more than run-of-the-mill diversity training, perhaps some sandwiches and bad coffee, maybe even some biscuits. But today is different. We're going to investigate this whodunit together. We're going to examine the evidence, and we'll look at the people of interest, and then you'll go off and you'll get your coffee, and you'll start your own investigations. Who am I? You might be asking yourselves, so I'm your consulting detective. You're Sherlock Holmes, you're Miss Marple, albeit younger, you're V.I. Borowski, I'm Ms. Hardey, and I've spent the past 2 decades researching and working with tech organizations. I've been examining workplace experiences, career pathways, community advocacy, and specialist EDI support groups. I have a sharp eye for detail, a relentless pursuit of the facts, and I've made it my assignment to unravel the whodunit at EDI, specifically the case of women in tech. My goal is to put the emphasis on the who within tech organization actually does EDI and the profound impact this has on work culture. And this is important because identifying the individuals responsible for implementing diversity is crucial to hold individuals accountable, providing effective leadership, resource allocation, and fostering open communication and collaboration. So now, let's take a closer look at the situation we have on our hands in tech corporate environments regarding EDI. Let's turn to the evidence. This first slide is taken from a standard diversity presentation, and we can see a clear correlation between more diverse organizations and those that are likely to perform well. And it reminds me of the case of a tech organization that publishes a yearly workload transparency report. The report has been shared across the organization for the past 8 years. And during this time, not one person has asked the purpose of the report, how the data was compiled, or crucially, any evidence of the report findings impacting EDI at the organization. And I requested this data for us. In a company of 5,000 individuals, 1%, less than 50 people, had opened and read that report. It matters not who the numbers are about, but who reads the EDI reports. And why do we need to read the report? It matters to read the report to gain insight into an organization's progress, their gaps, their commitments, enabling both short and long-term transparency and informed decision-making. This is our diversity training booklet, marked with the standard tick box EDI benchmarks. And the first benchmark's been ticked off for us, recruit women. And scribbled in the margin of the booklet, I am not diversity for hire. It's hitting the numbers. According to Boston Consulting Group, women control 40% of global wealth, which is 51% in the US. So it's no wonder that Bloomberg, Harvard Business Review, Financial Times, Forbes report that companies with greater gender-balanced teams have a higher return on equity. Yet simply ticking the box by recruiting women is not enough. The numbers only provide quantitative information regarding the number of women to engage or the number of women hired. The evidence unmistakably supports women's wealth creation and impact on the organization's success. So it's reasonable to infer that women drive EDI initiatives, and EDI initiatives attract women. This text is taken from the bottom of a real job advert. Embrace the alchemy of diversity. Suspicious. Looks more like a branding statement to me. You know what? Despite the branding, this company, a real company, still has a diversity problem. And so many tech companies have diversity statements. I've yet to come across a tech company that does not engage with this level of self-promotion. Why is this problematic? It's not the statement itself, but the very fact that it's hyperbole and public relations, while at the same organization, EDI remains non-existent or is poorly implemented. Now let's dive into another piece of evidence, the optics of diversity on a company website. So this morning on the train, I typed workplace diversity into Google and received over 692 million search returns. Feels like a dead end, doesn't it? But I remember attending an all-hands meeting of a tech startup. The CEO raised the topic of diversity and asked the room of 50 staff, what should we say about diversity? And eventually the consensus was to find copyright-free images of women working in the office and post them on the company website. And I'm curious what the answer would have been that day if copyright images of diversity weren't so freely available. And this raises an important question. Are these images just for show? And it's crucial to recognize having diverse images on a website does not reflect real progress in promoting equality and inclusion within an organization. Did you know? Last year, only 79 Fortune 500 companies, that's about 1 in 6, publish annual EDI or DEI reports, marking their progress. This shows there's a gap between words and actions that's prevalent even among large corporations. For EDIs, we've answered the why. We can see the numbers. There's some semblance of the what from the evidence, but we must look at the who and the how, the specific people tasked with carrying out the central roles and responsibilities. So let's move on to the persons of interest in our whodunit. And one group worth considering is the marginalized groups themselves. Are women in tech groups, for example, well positioned to tackle the gender disparities and programmer culture within a tech industry? Can we apply the same logic to marginalized groups? Individuals from minority ethnic backgrounds, low socioeconomic backgrounds, disabled individuals, or the LGBTQIA+ community. These groups can contribute to improving organizational outcomes and addressing discrimination. However, in the corporate tech environment, it's challenging for these groups to gain leverage within senior management and enact meaningful change. While they excel in community advocacy, they often lack the necessary resources and support from senior leaders to enable effective transformation. So let's go to our second person of interest, interview panels. Interview panels are responsible for recruitment. By changing the makeup of these panels and asking the right questions, we may believe that we've solved the problem. But is it that simple? Let's take a closer look. I have a character for you. Her name's Professor Mariann Hardey. Okay, it's me. Over the past 18 months, I've been invited to sit on 25 interview panels. I've chaired 11, so one might argue that I've been instrumental in solving the numbers game. But let's delve deeper into why I was invited into some of those panels. And the answer is diversity. They needed a woman to meet the diversity quota for those panels. So let's consider some of the job interview questions related to EDI. So a first one, for example, how would you promote inclusivity and diversity within our organization? Pretty standard. Can you provide an example of a time when you successfully navigated a diverse work environment, how it contributed to the overall success of your project or team? Tell us about a time when you actively sought diverse perspectives or opinions to make a better informed decision. These questions are not inherently bad, they're actually really important. We must ask ourselves, though, how do we know we're getting genuine answers and not just what the candidates think that we want to hear? While it's essential to ask the right kinds of questions, we need to be aware that candidates may tailor their answers to align with expectations and increase their chances of getting the job, okay? Inviting multiple women or individuals from diverse backgrounds to interview panels alone is not enough to drive meaningful change in corporate tech culture. In some cases, gender-specific invitations can create new biases and tensions within those organizations when candidates feel they're given preferential treatment or they're labeled as a diversity hire, okay? Let's move on to a third person of interest in the EDI whodunit. EDI officers or groups responsible for kind of doing diversity within organizations. It's common practice to assign someone the title of EDI officer, or to give the impression that diversity and inclusion are kind of being addressed within the organization. And I've recently come across a case note from an investigation into HR efficiencies at tech organizations, and the number one priority mentioned by HR managers was protecting the company from being sued. So when companies prioritize avoiding legal issues in their diversity policies, it leads to superficial, reactive measures focused on legal compliance rather than fostering genuine inclusion and equality. So we've examined the evidence and we've identified our persons of interest. So how do we solve the mystery of EDI? Well, at the risk of spoiling a very famous whodunit, which is Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, we're all in some ways complicit in this case. I said at the start it's the who and the how that makes for the parallel with the whodunit, and we've looked at both of those. In the real world, though, it's not a singular one impressive figure who solves the mystery. It's a team of people at all levels that help solve the case. And the purpose of this talk is twofold. First, I want to address every individual in this room tasked with solving EDI directly. I see you, I recognize you, I know you lack the resources, and you're burdened with responsibility of resolving a complex issue. My personal hope is your role and responsibilities will be acknowledged and valued on par with CEOs and board of directors. And second, now that we understand the who and the how, we must realize that transforming work culture is not the task for one person or specialized groups alone. For example, if a tech CEO mandates that working from the office based on personal biases against remote work, how does that contribute to diversity and inclusion? Let me be clear. I'm not dismissive by any means of the value of EDI initiatives and what they've been achieved so far. For the past 2 decades of my investigations in tech organizations, EDI initiatives have done many things. We've changed job descriptions, we've allowed specialists, community groups together, changed promotion benchmarks, facilitated flexible working. But it is time to shift our focus to individuals who coordinate and sustain these initiatives. We need to recognize the need to distribute the weight of EDI from one person to multiple persons of interest, to promote a collective effort to create a workplace that's truly inclusive and equitable. Like the whodunit, EDI needs to understand the mechanics of how all the factors fit together to avoid repeating the whos and the hows again and again. Now, a fictional detective, she starts by confronting us with a mystery, and she ends it by cracking it for us. She clears us of accountability, and she takes away our uncertainty. And I'm afraid that this particular detective with this particular mystery has done the opposite. We can't simply point at Colonel Mustard in the library with a candlestick and wash our hands of EDI. All of us are responsible for promoting, sustaining workplace diversity, and we all have our part to play in the number game as the whodunit. Thank you.